My name is Stuart Alexander. I'm a music video director, cinematographer, editor, and I'm runner-up Beaver Scout of the Year in 1996. So last year, me and Frank were shooting a press promo for the Somewhere In Between music video. We took a break, but we kept talking. About 5 minutes in, I had the wherewithal to turn the camera back on and ask what I thought would be a few random inserts cut into the video. What happened for me was something I'm more proud of than the music video itself. I didn't prepare any questions or agenda. The only thing I thought about in advance was which burger van we passed would be least likely to kill us if we ate lunch there. What we came away with was a raw, unfiltered look at imposter syndrome. I thought it would be really helpful for people to hear, so I suggested we put it out. The feedback and the messages I received were lovely, so thank you. The universal message they all shared was, I feel that way too, and now I feel better knowing that he feels that way. The second commonality in the messages was, do more, which I was extremely resistant to. I am not a trained journalist, I'm not even a trained filmmaker. I felt fortunate enough just to have scraped through the last one. You know, imposter syndrome. I decided to get over myself. I sent Frank a message, he said we should do it. I picked soundcheck at his Oxford show because I was filming nearby. I gave him nothing except the topic of conversation, drugs. I didn't use any notes, I didn't prepare a single question, and there's virtually no editing in this, so expect crosstalk, us stumbling our ways to a point, things you have in a regular conversation. I like Frank because he thinks about hard things. He not only looks into the abyss, he skinny dips in it, pulling out colours and shape that have no business being in there, chucks it in an IKEA frame and puts it on his fucking mantelpiece. I'm operating off the principle that sometimes in life all you need is a quiet space, an honest pal, and an open mind. So let's see where that takes us. Enjoy. I think rock bottom is a really interesting concept, right?
Right.
Because you probably in your head, when you were in the thick of it, were like, if these things happen, I will then go get help.
Yeah.
But usually in my experience with my friends, their rock bottom wasn't what they expected. So
Sure.
what was your perception of rock bottom then what actually happened?
The first thing I would say is that my experience of rock bottom as a concept for myself and for other people is that it's always a lot further down than you think it is. I had an occasion where I played a show, and then some friends of mine came down. This is in the middle of a tour, and we ended up getting on it after the show, and I ended up going back to their house and staying up all night, and then getting a fucking cab for like 60 miles to the next gig and showing up. Very obviously hadn't been to bed, still had a pocket full of gear to keep myself going, and I was just in a complete state. And we had 1,500 people in for that second night, and I played an awful show, like absolutely miserably terrible. And the worst part of it, looking back, was that I was really worried that it was going to be terrible, and I didn't actually like fall over and die on stage. I got through the show, and I came off stage and sort of said to the others, "That was all right, wasn't it?" And they were all just like, "No, that wasn't all right." And I felt awful about it, but I didn't. I mean, I kept doing drugs after the show. Do you know what I mean? Because I was on a tear, I was on a binge, and you know, I didn't do drugs on tour again anytime soon after that. But
Oh, really?
I didn't stop doing drugs. Do you know what I mean? That wasn't like a wake up call. And you know, I'd always sort of assumed that playing live and doing what I do is the focus of my existence, and being publicly awful at it because I was doing drugs, I had assumed would be a rock bottom, a wake up call, however you want to put it, and it wasn't really. I mean, yeah, that was pretty bad. I had another occasion where I think I did 6 days without going to bed.
What were you taking?
Just cocaine.
Right.
But an awful lot of cocaine.
Yeah.
And yogurt was because you got to
Your
get
stomach
sugar.
lingering and
Yeah, you
stuff,
got to get
yeah.
sugar in your system, otherwise you pass out. I mean, anybody who's got involved in drugs will tell you that there is so many times when you say to yourself, "This is the last time. Like I've really fucked it now. I'm never going to do this again." And you don't really have a dramatic last time. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't really work like that. I was on a path that was not going well because my drug problem was still pretty kind of bourgeois, just in the sense I still lived somewhere. I wasn't smoking crack. Do you know what I mean? Like I wasn't stealing car radios and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? There's definitely many further levels of addiction and life collapse that I didn't get to. But I know people who did, and I hung out with the people who did, and I did drugs with people who went on to fall into those kind of pits of despair, or however you want to put it. And there is a point at which you really do abandon all other interests other than drugs. I didn't get to that point. I was fortunate enough to have other things in my life, but I could see that end of a tunnel from where I was standing, if you see what I mean, at certain points. And I wonder whether I would have got further down that. The other thing to say, of course, is that if you do drugs for 6 straight days, you are at risk of dying. And that was the worst thing I ever did, but in terms of risks to my health. But like, just broadly speaking, people have heart attacks. Do you know what I mean? It's like you put that much stimulant in your body, you do have heart attacks. And members of my crew said to me at certain points that they were basically at a certain time waiting for the phone call, just saying that I'd had an Amy Winehouse, essentially. If you see what I mean by that. Like,
But let me ask you then, right? Is there part of you that's just like, because if it's not on some level a kind of cry for help, if you find out later that people around you that are supposed to love you are like, hey man, we were just waiting till you died.
Well, I don't want to. It wasn't like they were just sitting around twiddling their thumbs waiting for it. But I think there was.
Maybe I'm just projecting. I would hope my friends would come round to me and like drag me to a hospital.
Yeah, people did. I mean, people said stuff
Right.
for sure, but I was quite sort of headstrong with it. And as I say, I would generally, with the exception of that time I mentioned on tour, I would generally do all this stuff away from my touring family. So it was kind of, I was quite good at compartmentalising, should we say.
Because it's interesting, surely the easiest times to get drugs and meet these people are on tour.
Actually, no, because if you're in a town that you don't know, you don't have reliable contacts. I mean, there's an
You should
old...
come out with me.
Well, yeah. There's an old saw about how you always ask the in-house lighting guy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And all that kind of thing. And it's not always true, and no disrespect to in-house lighting guys the world over. But, I mean, it's not that hard to get on tour, but it's easier. I had a thing where I had a guy who lived 5 minutes walk from my place. I don't know where, but I could text him and he would tick me, so he'd just put it through my letterbox within 5 minutes if I dropped him a text.
Jesus.
So yeah, it was very easy for me to get a hold of where I was living.
Rehab, you went, right?
No, I didn't go to rehab. I had an intensive one-on-one therapy thing. I didn't actually go to an institution, but I had a drug-focused therapy, intense therapy thing. I was skeptical about therapy as a concept.
Would that have been your first experience with therapy?
Yes,
Is that right?
yeah. I was skeptical about therapy as a concept. My wife was a psychotherapist, or a trainee psychotherapist at the time, and so was obviously more on board with the concept. And we talked about it a lot, and she said, I think you should talk to somebody, and she said, I'm going to find somebody for you to talk to. Because I'm trying to say this without sounding gigantically arrogant, but like I am quite intellectually combative,
of course,
in life. And she was like, you're going to pick the wings off quite a few people.
Yeah, you just get argumentative.
Yeah, and just, I mean, a better example of this, like there's that Alan Carr book about quitting smoking, which I read, and it's the opening of it says, by the time you finish this book, you will have quit smoking. And I was just like, well, fuck, say about that. And it didn't work for me because I was just adamant that it wasn't going to. And so there was, so she spent some time doing a lot of research and found a good person who was kind of top of the game, as it were, which, I spent a lot of money on it. I mean, I was also spending a lot of money on drugs. So,
sure.
And it was CBT based. And it was interesting because it was immediately efficacious. And I think that part of that was because on some level I was, of course, aware that I needed to make changes. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't so wrapped up in it that I thought that I was totally fine.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And like I was keen to not be that person anymore. So, but it was. I found it a really intellectually interesting exercise and surprisingly effective.
When I went, I've been a few times to CBT. It's usually the first couple of weeks you're like, yeah, this is fun. This is a nice intellectual exercise and it's fun to learn about these things. And then there's some time about week 3 or 4 that you actually get to the problem. It's super shit because you realise that it's maybe not for example, a drug problem, it's a self-esteem issue or something
Sure,
like that.
of course. I mean, and I think that, so to dive into that a little deeper, like, I think that one of the things about drugs for me was that one of the things that drugs do is they kind of wreck my singing voice, and they also weirdly destroy my sense of timing. My ability to just strum a guitar in time just goes out the fucking window. Not just while I'm doing them, but for a day or two afterwards as well. And I know that, and there was a degree to which that behaviour was a form of self-harm. And when I was younger, I did a lot of cutting self-harm for a period of time, and that stopped. And there was a few years before I then started getting into drugs. But like, I think that there is a strong, and this comes from my CBT sessions, by the way, that there is a strong argument to be made that on some levels my drug use was a semi-conscious form of self-harm, if you see what I mean. It was like, this will damage me. And I mean, most people who have problems with drugs, I mean, obviously drugs are an addictive substance. Sure. I mean, they can be problematic in and of themselves, but most people who get lost in that kind of stuff are dealing with some other sort of pain underneath it.
Yeah. Especially if you're able to kind of walk away. Addiction's that kind of funny thing about, like, here's an even bigger question. Do you consider yourself an addict?
That is a good question, because as I said before, there are definitely many, many, many worse levels of addiction than I ever got anywhere near.
Yeah.
And I don't want to trivialize that by calling myself an addict. I don't want to imply that it's all the same thing or anything like that. I certainly had a really bad habit. I definitely accept that terminology. I mean, it's difficult because there are debates about whether or not cocaine is physically addictive anyway. Do you know what I mean? Heroin is definitely physically addictive,
sure.
as in if you don't take it, then you have withdrawals.
Yeah.
That's generally not the case with coke, but but mentally addictive is another thing. So, I mean, I hesitate to use the word addict to describe myself, but certainly the whole ethos of the idea that once an addict, always an addict, I think is a useful one. In the sense that the desire and need to stay clean after you've got clean is a lifelong thing. Do you know what I mean? If you've ever reached a point in your life where you find that sort of behaviour, then you can find it again. You know, you can do it again, always. So,
have you relapsed since?
Well, a few times, yeah. I will say that what I've not done is do the multi-day chaos thing. I have done drugs since, but it has been more contained. And like, I think I've got a feeling I said this last time we were talking about it. I think, you know, in certain contexts and in moderation, I've had some of the best times of my life doing drugs. Do you know what I mean? There's a reason people do them.
Totally.
You know, they feel good. Yeah. And all the rest. And, you know, the first time I did E, I had the best night of my fucking life. Do you know what I mean? And I kind of don't want to rule out the possibility of doing that, but I also want to be self-aware about my own weaknesses and predilections and potential for falling off the wagon, falling off the rails, however you want to put it.
Drugs, like you just said, I can't turn around and say, these are terrible. Everyone on it is depressed, you will ruin your life.
Yeah, sure.
You got a niece or nephew?
I've got a nephew and two nieces, and there are other youngsters in my family as well.
If they come to you, see Uncle Frank, what is this like?
What
are you going to say?
This has already happened.
Really?
Yes. I've had a young relative talk to me about it because they know that I've done it, and it has come up in their social context.
Right.
Like you say, I mean, there's no universe in which I can say I've not done it or that it was always terrible, but I can talk to them about good and bad ways of engaging with that world. I mean, I think one of the things that I said to them was that, like, if drugs are a addition to an evening, that's fine. If they are the evening, that's less fine. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're with your friends and having a good time and then you do something to make it more fun, that's defensible and survivable and all the rest of it. If you're just meeting up with people to do drugs, then you have to be more careful about what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? Because that was one of the things for me for years. You know, for the beginning of my engagement with drugs, particularly cocaine, it was like something that was like around whilst I was with my friends, but at a certain point it became the reason I went out. Do you know what I mean? Was to find some and then probably go home again with some friends and stay up for days and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, there was no sort of pretense that I was just, oh, there's some here, I'll do it. You know, it was just like, where are the drugs?
That was the mission.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? And that is a different type of behaviour, I think.
For therapy, what did you learn about yourself that you didn't know?
That's a good question. I mean, that I didn't know. I there was a lot of stuff that sort of came to the foreground that in my heart of hearts, I think I suspected. I've had issues in my life with honesty is a blunt way of putting it, and cocaine in particular makes a lot of people, including me, quite sneaky. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's all under the table, down low, not telling people what you're doing, where you're going, all that kind of thing. And sort of, this is heavy shit to talk about. I had sort of constructed various sort of structures in my life that were there to sort of make sure that no one person knew exactly what I was doing, kind of thing, at any time, and that I was good at just sort of ducking and weaving. Do you know what I mean?
Kind of. Say a wee bit more.
You know, well, I mean, so to go back to what we were talking about with my band and crew, they knew a lot about a certain part of my life, but there was a huge chunk they didn't know about, and that was a deliberate construction. My mum didn't know about chunks of my life, and indeed quite a lot of my drug friends didn't really know that much about my professional life.
Right.
I mean, they knew that I was a musician and everything, but I wouldn't really I wouldn't invite them to shows, let's say that.
Worlds were kept separate.
Yeah, exactly. Compartmentalization is the word, and it was just sort of thereby enabling me to navigate things, and at least one of the reasons for that was so that I wouldn't get told off, basically. Do you know what I mean? So that I was free to behave in a way that I wanted to behave without
Who do you
consequence.
think was going to do that?
Tell me off.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, anyone who cares about me, basically. Like my family, my mum. I mean, my mum really... Well, my mum didn't know about my drug issues, although I think she knew a bit more than I thought she knew at the time. Let's say that. She's not an idiot. I mean, she's not familiar with that world.
Got you.
But I think that she could tell that there was something up at various points. Do you know what I mean? I mean, if you're on a day 2 or a day 3 of a binge and your phone rings your mum, it's just like, I'm not fucking answering that. Yeah. And I usually do answer the phone to my mum, kind of thing. And then just constantly like then kind of going, oh, I've got a hangover and a cold, when I finally had a bit of sleep.
6th one this month.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know what I mean? And she's just like, sounds like you've got a cold. And it's like, yeah, kind of thing. And, but yeah, so I think that the extent to which I was behaving like that was, it was more extreme than I had allowed myself to recognise, let's say.
It's almost like it's a part of, for lack of a better word, doing the rockstar thing. Eventually, you probably will just end up with an interesting habit somewhere. I've never met anyone that, high or drunk, was an arsehole that I didn't suspect or know that person was a fucking arsehole in some way.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, I think these behaviours amplify, these substances amplify behaviours rather than create them. I mean, I'm absolutely not going to sit here and say that I've never been an arsehole, drunk or high or sober, because of course I have. I've been around enough musicians who are just assholes in my time. It's just like, you just see people just being fucking pricks to the people around them, particularly to the less famous people who work in this industry.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's nothing that boils my piss more than musicians who are shitty to crew, whether that's their own crew or house crew, or whatever. It's just kind of like, fuck you, man. You don't get to do your job unless they do theirs.
Totally. Yeah.
And they get paid a fraction of what you get paid, and they start before you and they finish after you, and just fuck up, man. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, and then I'm sure that there's probably out there somebody who will scoff at this statement, but I like to think the way that I am when I'm high is usually more gregarious. Do you know what I mean? I'm not like aggressive or something like that. Do you know what I mean? I tend to be more kind of social, which is part of the reason I enjoyed it when I first started doing it. But yeah, I'd like to think it didn't make me shit on the people around me. But again, I'm not saying that that's a blanket true statement.
You're allowed a bad day.
Yeah, totally. And we all have things that we don't regret. That whole no regrets idea is just sociopathic. Yeah. Well, it's just fucking ludicrous on its face. It's just kind of like, who anywhere doesn't have any regrets? What a dumb thing. If you have no regrets, you're either a sociopath or you're the dumbest person who's ever lived. Do you know what I mean? And just completely socially unaware.
But then there's the opposite side, which you seem to suffer a lot for, like myself, is you just kick around all the shit that you wish you know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah, totally. I mean,
you're not forgiving yourself.
Yeah, that is a thing that I definitely do. I can wake myself up at 3 a.m. thinking about an unkind thing I said to somebody in passing in 2012. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that shit tortures me. And on some levels, I mean, this is the thing. I used the word shame earlier, and I think shame is a really interesting word that we should spend more time talking about, because while I understand the kind of societal drive in the last few decades to kind of destigmatize shame and all that kind of thing, and certainly if you're talking about something like sexuality or gender identity or something like that, I don't think there should be any shame around any of that. Nevertheless, I think that there is a social role for shame, and I am ashamed of a lot of my behavior when I was heavily into drugs. And I fucking should be. Do you know what I mean? I was an arsehole. I did some terrible things. I was unkind to myself and to the people around me and the people I love. And I should be ashamed of that. And shame serves that function of telling you that you did something bad and that you shouldn't do it again. You know,
it's kind of your like North Star and a compass. You're like,
it's it's your conscience speaking. It's your morality speaking to you. And I think that I guess this is a minor point, but like it is possible for society to get too far away from the idea of shame. Do you know what I mean? It's just like there are some things people should be ashamed of. Do you know what I mean? Like for sure, in all human behaviour, there are shameful things that you can do.
You said something there about you were almost like dodging various people or groups in your life. And that just kind of reminded me of the first conversation that we were talking about. It was like the many Halloween costumes of Frank Turner. You tried, you jumped around, you were loads of people to different people.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a point where you felt like you could be yourself 100%?
I guess the word I would use is unification, like of different selves or whatever. It's something that I think about a lot and that I am in favour of, broadly speaking. I mean, at the same, I think that having a variegated personality is fine. Do you know what I mean? I mean, having different interests and different friend groups that you do different things with and all that kind of thing is totally fine. And I definitely have that, But the idea of not actively shape-shifting, as it were, I think is a good one. And it's something that I'm actively trying to do, and with some success, I would say. Do you know what I mean? And certainly where I am right now in my life, I feel a lot more centered than I have in a long time, and a lot more sort of coherent. I have a new partner in my life who's somebody. The reason she's in my life is because she immediately saw all of me the minute that the day we met, in a way that was really uncanny. And
motherfucker, we've got a fucking sound check.
No,
we'll talk about this next
time.
But
it was, and I mean, it was a connection with another person like I've never had in my life. That was, I just felt seen in a way I've never felt seen before, and that was incredibly important to me because I would like to be seen by someone. Do you know what I mean? And
do you think she brought that to you, or you were just ready to accept that for yourself?
Oh, I think that's a function of her personality and her character and her perception, I would say. I mean, I think I probably was ready for it, of course. Sure. But I think that she is a unique individual who has that perceptiveness.
Dude, we will talk about that another day.
Good chat, man. Yeah, definitely.